I thought sleeping less was just part of getting older. Nights became shorter, rest felt lighter, and I told myself it was normal. What I didn't see was how quietly poor sleep was shaping my energy, my patience, and my independence long before I felt truly exhausted. Sleep did not disappear all at once. It faded quietly, almost politely, the way many things do with age. I didn't notice a clear turning point. Nights simply became lighter. I woke more often. Falling back asleep took longer. I told myself it was normal. After all, everyone said older people sleep less. That explanation felt reasonable, even comforting. It allowed me to stop paying attention. What I didn't realize was that rest was no longer restoring me the way it once had. I could get through the day, but I no longer felt settled inside it. Mornings began with a sense of effort, not exhaustion, just a quiet heaviness that followed me as the hours passed. This change didn't feel dramatic. That's what made it easy to ignore. I adjusted without thinking. I planned less in the mornings. I moved a little slower. I rested more often. None of this felt like loss. It felt like adaptation. And adaptation has always been part of aging well. But over time, something subtle shifted. The body began waking without the sense of renewal that sleep is meant to provide. Nights ended, but rest didn't quite arrive. The difference was small but persistent. I noticed it first in patience. I had less of it. Small frustrations lingered longer than they should have. Sounds felt sharper. Decisions felt heavier. I blamed personality, stress, the world moving too fast. I didn't blame sleep. Sleep, in my mind, had simply changed, and I accepted that. What I didn't understand yet was that rest isn't measured by hours alone. It's measured by what the body is able to repair, reset, and release during the night. When that process weakens, the effects ripple outward quietly. Rest stopped restoring not because I was sleeping less, but because I stopped protecting sleep as something essential. That realization came later. For a long time I believed that if I could still function, everything was fine. I didn't feel sick. I wasn't falling asleep during the day. I wasn't complaining. Those felt like signs that nothing was wrong. But sleep isn't only about avoiding collapse. It's about maintaining steadiness. When rest becomes shallow, the body compensates. It uses more effort to do the same things. It tolerates more strain. It carries more tension. That compensation works for a while. Then it begins to cost something. I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that sleep felt different, and I accepted it without question. That acceptance felt peaceful at first, but peace built on misunderstanding can quietly erode the very stability it's meant to protect. The truth is, rest had stopped restoring me long before I admitted anything had changed, and once that happened, everything else began adjusting around the absence. Sleep didn't feel neglected. It felt managed. I didn't stay up late. I didn't party. I didn't ignore my body on purpose. My days were orderly, predictable, responsible. That's why it took so long to realize sleep was slipping away. Neglect often looks nothing like carelessness. Sometimes it looks like routine. Evenings stretched a little longer. Television stayed on past the time my eyes felt tired. I told myself it helped me relax. News, shows, familiar voices. It all felt soothing. The body felt still, but the mind stayed alert. Bedtime drifted. When I finally turned off the lights, sleep didn't arrive the way it used to. Thoughts lingered. Worries that felt manageable during the day grew louder at night. The quiet made them harder to avoid. I lay there telling myself rest would come eventually. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it did. When sleep broke in the early morning hours, I didn't fight it. I assumed that waking early was just part of getting older. I stayed up. I read. I watched the morning begin. It felt peaceful in its own way. But peace and rest are not the same thing. I also stopped protecting sleep from interruption. Late coffee felt harmless. Afternoon naps felt necessary. Long stretches of sitting replaced movement. Each choice made sense on its own. Together, they reshaped the night. Another quiet factor was resignation. I believed sleep was no longer fully under my control. I had heard it too often. Older people just don't sleep the same. That sentence carries permission to stop trying. Once you stop trying, habits settle in quickly. There was also pride involved. I didn't want to complain. I didn't want to fuss about sleep like it was a problem to solve. I had lived through harder things. This felt minor by comparison, so I adjusted instead of questioning. I structured my days around lower energy. I reduced commitments. I avoided early plans. These adjustments felt wise. They were kind in a way, but they also allowed poor sleep to remain invisible. The most powerful reason sleep gets neglected is that it fails quietly. There's no sharp warning, no immediate consequence. You can live for years without good rest and still appear fine. That appearance is deceptive. Sleep deprivation doesn't always shout. It whispers through irritability, through slower thinking, through reduced balance and resilience. It settles into the background. Because of that, it's easy to believe nothing can be done, or that nothing needs to be. I didn't skip sleep. I simply stopped defending it. I didn't realize that rest requires boundaries. Without them, sleep becomes optional. And when sleep becomes optional, it loses its power to restore. That realization didn't come from a single bad night. It came from noticing how much effort it took to feel steady during the day. By then, sleep had been neglected for a long time, not out of disregard, but out of misunderstanding. The cost of poor sleep isn't dramatic, it's cumulative. I didn't wake up one morning feeling broken. I woke up feeling slightly less myself, and that difference stayed. Focus softened. Conversations required more effort. I lost my place in thought more often. Not enough to worry, but enough to notice. Emotion followed a similar pattern. I felt thinner inside, less buffered. Small disappointments felt heavier. Joy felt quieter. Everything flattened just a little. Physically, the changes were subtle but persistent. Balance felt less reliable, not unstable, just uncertain. Movements required more attention. I held on to railings more often. I paused before standing. Again, this felt like age, but sleep had something to do with it. When the body doesn't rest deeply, the nervous system stays slightly activated. Muscles don't release fully. Reaction time slows. The body remains in a low-level state of readiness. That readiness feels like caution. Caution becomes habit. I also noticed recovery changing. After busy days, fatigue lingered longer. A good night's sleep no longer reset me. I needed more time to feel settled again. This was perhaps the clearest signal and the easiest to explain away. Of course I'm tired, I told myself. I'm older. What I didn't see was that tiredness was no longer proportional to effort. It arrived more easily and left more slowly. Poor sleep doesn't create crisis. It creates vulnerability. It makes the body less forgiving. It reduces margin. It narrows tolerance for stress, movement, and change. Over time, that narrowing affects confidence. When the body feels less reliable, The mind becomes cautious. Activities feel heavier before they begin. Plans feel more demanding. Life becomes smaller, not by force, but by preference. Sleep supports resilience. Without it, everything feels harder than it should. I didn't connect these dots at first. Most people don't. We experience changes separately: fatigue here, mood there, balance somewhere else. Sleep is rarely blamed, but once I began paying attention, the pattern became clearer. Nights that felt more settled led to days that felt more manageable. Even small improvements in rest made noticeable differences. That realization didn't alarm me. It relieved me. It meant that what I was experiencing wasn't just decline, it was strain. And strain can be eased. For a long time, I treated sleep as a reward, something earned after a long day, something to fit in once everything else was done. That mindset kept rest secondary. What changed was not my schedule, but my understanding. Sleep isn't a luxury. It's daily maintenance. The body uses sleep to restore balance, physical, emotional, and mental. Without enough quality rest, it borrows from tomorrow to get through today. That borrowing adds up. When I stopped viewing sleep as optional, I began treating evenings differently, not rigidly, gently. I noticed what helped the body settle and what didn't. I respected tiredness instead of pushing through it. I allowed the day to close sooner. I didn't aim for perfect sleep. I aimed for protected sleep. That distinction mattered. Sleep doesn't need to be flawless to be effective. It needs consistency and respect. When the body senses safety and rhythm, it releases more easily. The nervous system softens. Muscles let go. This isn't about control. It's about cooperation. I also stopped judging my nights. Bad sleep no longer felt like failure. It felt like information. That shift alone reduced tension. The body responds better when it doesn't feel pressured. Rest began supporting me again, not dramatically, but reliably. Mornings felt steadier. Emotions felt less sharp. Energy lasted longer. These weren't miracles, they were returns to baseline. That baseline matters. Sleep didn't fix aging, it supported it. What surprised me most was how much sleep affected independence. When I rested better, I trusted my body more. Movements felt less risky. Decisions felt lighter. I didn't have to think as much before acting. That mental ease is freedom. Poor sleep makes everything feel negotiable. Good sleep restores instinct. I stood up without planning. I walked without scanning. I moved with less hesitation. That confidence preserved dignity. Independence isn't about doing everything. It's about choosing. Sleep protects choice by supporting clarity, balance, and resilience. When I slept better, I needed less help. Not because I was stronger, but because I was steadier. That steadiness reduced fear. Fear shrinks life faster than any physical limitation. Sleep doesn't eliminate risk. It reduces vulnerability. That difference is everything. What allowed sleep to return was not discipline. It was patience. I stopped trying to force rest. I created conditions for it. Some nights were better than others. I let that be true. Consistency mattered more than perfection. Sleep became a companion again, not a goal. That relationship sustained itself. Over time, rest supported me quietly, protecting energy, patience, balance, and peace. I don't sleep the way I did at 40. I don't expect to. But I no longer neglect sleep as something optional, because rest, like dignity, is something we protect, not because it's fragile, but because it matters. And that protection changes everything.